Once upon a time, there was a king. No. Once upon a time, there was a piece of wood. Just a simple piece of wood from the woodpile, the kind that gets burnt in the fireplace. One fine day, it turned up in the workshop of an old carpenter by the name of Master Antonio, better known as Master Cherry because of his shiny, bright, cherry-red nose.
This piece of wood is just what I need. I'm going to use it to make a table leg.
He had no sooner picked up his axe to begin work when he heard a small voice. "Don't hit me so hard!"
That's funny. I must have dreamt that somebody said something.
And he set to work again.
"Ow! You're hurting me!"
Frightened to death, Master Cherry falls down thunderstruck, and when he opens his eyes, he finds he's sitting on the floor. Geppetto knocks at Cherry's door. He is a spry little old man whom the boys called Polendina on account of his yellow wig that looked just like a dish of polenta.
What are you doing down there on the floor, Master Antonio? I'm teaching the ants their ABC. What brings you here?
My legs. I need a piece of wood so I can make myself a puppet that can dance, fence, and turn a somersault, so I can go round the world and pick up a crust of bread and a glass of wine. Master Antonio, happy as a lark to get rid of the piece of wood that had so frightened him, went to get it then and there. Geppetto lived in a cubbyhole of a room with one small window under the stairs. As soon as he got there, he began work on his puppet.
I want to call him Pinocchio. It's a name that will bring him luck.
As the puppet began to take shape, he became alive and began to play tricks on Geppetto.
You rascal! Here you're not even finished, and already you've got no respect for your father.
He had no sooner finished the feat than a kick was aimed at the tip of his nose. Despite this, he set the puppet on the ground. Taking him by the hand, he taught him to put one foot in front of the other. Pinocchio stretched his legs and began to walk alone until once out of the door, he ran away. Finally, a policeman came along and grabbed him by his nose and handed him over to Geppetto. In the meanwhile, a small crowd of onlookers began to gather round. Poor little puppet!
I'll bet that big nasty Geppetto will beat the living daylights out of him.
To make a long story short, what with all they said and did, the policeman let Pinocchio free and dragged poor Geppetto to prison instead. Pinocchio ran away over the fields as fast as he could, jumping over thorn hedges and ditches full of water on his way. Once home, he saw a large cricket who was climbing up the wall.
"Who are you?" "I'm Jimmy Cricket, and I've got something important to tell you." "Go ahead and tell me then, but get a move on." "Heaven help those boys who revolt against their parents. Sooner or later, they'll regret it bitterly. Sing if you want, little Cricket, but I want to leave, because otherwise they'll send me to school." Why don't you learn a trade to earn your bread? The only trade that's to my liking is eating, drinking, sleeping, and having fun. Poor Pinocchio! Why should you feel sorry for me? Because you're a puppet and have a blockhead.
At these words, Pinocchio took a hammer and threw it at Jimmy Cricket, who dropped dead. Night fell, and Pinocchio began to feel the pangs of hunger. He ran to the fireplace where there was a pot bubbling, but the pot was painted on the wall. When all of a sudden, he saw a chicken egg on a pile of refuse. Pleased as Punch, he turned it round in his hands. And now how am I going to cook it? Shall I make an omelette? Or mightn't it taste better if I fried it? He cracked the egg into a frying pan, but instead of the egg, white and yolk, a brightly chirping chick popped out.
Thanks a lot for saving me the work of breaking out of the shell. Bye-bye. And say hello to all the folks.
He spread his wings and, heading for the window, flew away. The puppet just stood there, holding the eggshells, and since his stomach was grumbling more than ever, he decided to go find some charitable soul whom he could beg for a piece of bread. Just for the record, the night couldn't have been worse. Pinocchio was scared to death of thunder and lightning, but hunger was stronger than fear. So he started running, and about 100 leaps and bounds later, he reached the village. But everything was dark and deserted. In a fit of despair, he began to knock at the door of a house, until an old man finally appeared at the window.
Do you want at this time of night?
Wouldn't you be so kind as to give me a bit of bread?
Wait there, and I'll be right back.
Shortly thereafter, the window opened again.
There you are!
A basin full of water was poured down over Pinocchio, soaking him from head to foot. He went back home drenched to the skin and fell asleep, resting his sopping wet feet on a brazier full of burning coals. And little by little, his feet were charred. As the day dawned, he woke up because Geppetto was knocking at the door.
Open the door!
I can't, Daddy. The cat has eaten my feet.
Geppetto thought this whining was another of the puppet's pranks, and got into the house by climbing through the window. When he saw that Pinocchio really didn't have any feet, his heart was touched.
Oh, my poor little Pinocchio. How did you come to burn your feet?
I don't know, Daddy, but it was just an awful night. And I'm still hungry, and I don't have any feet anymore.
Geppetto took 3 pairs from his pocket.
These were to be my breakfast, but I'm happy to give them to you.
Now that he was no longer hungry, the puppet began to cry because he wanted a pair of new feet.
I promise I'll be good from now on.
That's what all children say when they want something. Geppetto, his heart touched, quickly set to work to attach a pair of new feet. And Pinocchio turned one somersault after the other for joy.
Ha! Ha! To show you how grateful I am, I want to go to school right now. But I need some clothes.
Geppetto made him a suit of flowered paper, a pair of shoes out of bark, and a hat out of breadcrumbs. No sooner was he dressed than Pinocchio began to strut like a peacock.
Dun 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 dun! I look like a real gentleman.
It's not fine clothes that makes a gentleman, it's clean clothes.
Dun 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 dun! All I need now is a primer. Dun dun dun!
But Geppetto didn't have any money to buy it for him.
Never mind.
Geppetto left the house and came back shortly thereafter in his shirt sleeves, even though it was snowing outside, with the primer under his arm.
Hey, and your jacket?
Oh, I sold it because it was too warm for me.
Pinocchio caught on immediately and threw his arms around his father and kissed him. Pinocchio set out towards school, but along the way he thought he heard what sounded like fife and drum music. What a pity that I have to go to school. Otherwise, today I'll go hear the fifes, and I'll go to school tomorrow. And there he was in a square full of people who crowded around a large shed. The puppet turned to a boy.
Hello. What's going on?
All you have to do is read that sign.
It just happens that today I don't know how to read.
It says, Great Puppet Theatre.
And how much is admission?
4p.
How about giving me 4p for this new primer?
As chance would have it, there was a peddler who had overheard the conversation.
For 4p, I'll buy it.
And the primer was sold then and there. When Pinocchio entered the puppet theatre, the show had already begun. All of a sudden, Harlequin stopped reciting and began shouting.
That one down there! That's Pinocchio!
And all the puppets came out from the wings.
You're right! It's really Pinocchio!
It's really Pinocchio!
At this point, the showman appeared. He was huge and so ugly that just looking at him was enough to frighten you.
What do you think you're doing there? Throwing my theatre into confusion?
Honestly, it's not my fault.
That's enough. We'll settle our accounts tonight.
When the show was over, the showman called Harlequin and Pulcinella.
Bring me that puppet. He seems to be made of dry wood, and I'm sure he'll make a nice fire for my roast.
The puppets didn't want to get Pinocchio, but frightened by the black looks their master threw them, they obeyed, and soon returned carrying Pinocchio, who was yelling his head off.
Daddy! Daddy! Save me! I don't want to die!
Fire Eater, that was the puppet showman's name, was not really all that bad deep down. When he saw Pinocchio struggling to free himself, he began to feel sorry and sneezed.
Stop whimpering. You've got to feel sorry for me too, for I don't have enough wood to finish roasting my mutton. I'll put some other puppet from my troupe on the fire.
He called the wooden policeman and told them to throw Harlequin in the fire. The poor puppet fell headlong on the ground in fright. Seeing this, Pinocchio began to ask for mercy.
Mercy, Master Fire Eater!
There are no masters here.
Mr. Director!
There are no directors here.
I ask for pardon, Mr. Excellency.
There's no pardon here worth anything.
In that case, I know what my duty is. Honorable policeman, tie me up and throw me in the river. It's not right that Harlequin should die for me.
All the puppets began to cry, including the policeman. Fire Eater was moved to pity and began to sneeze again.
Have I been forgiven?
You've been forgiven.
This made the puppets so happy that they all ran on stage and danced and jumped till dawn. The day after, Fire Eater called Pinocchio off to one side and gave him 5 gold coins.
Take them to your father and give him my greetings.
Pinocchio thanked him, embraced all the puppets and set off towards home. But he hadn't got very far when he met a fox which limped in one foot and a cat blind in both eyes.
Good morning, Pinocchio. How come you know my name? I know your father. I saw him yesterday shivering from the cold. From today, he won't shiver any more. I've become a gentleman now. You, a real gentleman. It's no laughing matter. With these 5 gold coins, I'll buy a new jacket for my father and a primer for school. I lost my leg to satisfy my stupid passion for study. And I lost my sight. Do you want to double your gold coins? Oh, I wish I could. And how? Come along with us and sow them in a field of miracles. The next morning you'll find a tree full of gold coins.
What nice guys.
Okay, let's go.
They walked and walked and finally arrived at the Inn of the Red Lobster.
Let's stop a while and have a bite to eat. At midnight we'll take off for the Field of Miracles.
The cat and the fox ate until they almost burst. Pinocchio, however, ate practically nothing because he was already suffering from an indigestion of gold coins. The puppet fell asleep right after supper and was dreaming of a field full of bushes laden with gold coins when the innkeeper came to tell him that it was past midnight.
Are my companions ready?
Well, they left 2 hours ago. They'll be waiting for you at the Field of Miracles at dawn.
Pinocchio continued on his journey and on the way heard a slight rustling of leaves. He turned and saw 2 black figures which looked like ghosts. Puppet hid the coins under his tongue and tried to run away. but he felt himself being grabbed and heard two horrible voices.
Your money or your life. Out with your money or you're a dead man. And after killing you, we'll kill your father too. No! No! My poor father! No, no!
And as he said this, the gold coins rattled in his mouth. One of the scoundrels pulled out a knife and tried to pry open his mouth. Pinocchio bit into his hand and bit it clean off, after which he spat it out. It was the paw of a cat. Puppet managed to free himself and began to run away over the fields. All at once, he found a deep ditch barring his path. He took a running leap and jumped to the other side. His pursuers, crash, bang, crash, fell down into the middle of the ditch. Pinocchio thought they were good and drowned. Then he realized they were still at his heels. The puppet was just about to give up when he saw a small white house shining in the distance. He got there all out of breath and began knocking at the door until a blue-haired child looked out the window.
There's nobody in this house. They are all dead. Open the door! Open the door!
The child disappeared, and Pinocchio heard the horrible voices again.
He won't get away anymore now. He should be hanged. Let's hang him.
No sooner said than done. The assassins bound him and hung him dangling to the branch of a large oak. Then they left, snickering and sneering.
Till tomorrow. Till tomorrow. Let's hope you'll be good enough to let us find you nice and dead. Oh, Daddy, if only you were here.
He closed his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched his legs, and turned stiff. When Pinocchio seemed more dead than alive, the child felt pity. She clapped her hands, and a falcon landed on the windowsill, waiting for her orders. For the child was none other than a fairy. Fly to the great oak, unloosen that dangling puppet, and lay him on the grass. The falcon flew away, and when he came back, the fairy clapped her hands again. A poodle appeared, seated on a coach drawn by 100 pairs of white mice. Go to the great oak. You will find a puppet half alive. Pick him up gently and bring him here to me. When the poodle returned with the puppet, the fairy called the most famous doctors in the neighborhood. A crow, an owl, and a talking cricket arrived in no time at all.
Well, in my opinion, this puppet is dead. But if, unfortunately, he is not dead, then he is alive. As for me, I think he's alive. But if, unfortunately, he is not alive, then that would be a sign that he is dead.
I know that puppet. He's a no-good rascal who will make his poor father die of a broken heart.
At these words, Pinocchio broke out weeping and sobbing.
When the dead man cries, it is a sign that he is getting better.
In my opinion, when a dead man cries, it's a sign that he doesn't want to die.
The three doctors had no sooner left the room than the fairy came near the puppet and realized he had a terrible fever. Then she dissolved a white powder in a glass of water and handed it to him. After you drink this, I'll give you a lump of sugar. First, I want the lump of sugar, and then I'll drink it. The fairy did as he asked, but then Pinocchio found all possible pretexts for not taking his medicine. At this point, 4 black rabbits came into the room carrying a small coffin. We've come to get you because you refused to drink your medicine and won't live more than a couple of minutes. Fairy? Fairy? Give me that glass. I don't want to die. And taking the glass, he emptied it immediately. Only a few minutes later, Pinocchio once more felt fit as a fiddle. The fairy, seeing him romp about the room, asked him how he had fallen into the hands of the assassins, and Pinocchio told her all that had happened. And what about the coins? What happened to them? I lost them. And he started telling her a bunch of lies, because he didn't want to tell her that he had them in his pocket. In the meanwhile, his nose began to grow and grow until he couldn't turn around in any direction. The fairy looked at him and laughed. Lies, my boy, are easy to recognize. Either they have short legs or they have long noses, and yours are of the kind with long noses. The fairy let him cry for a while, and then clapped her hands. A flock of woodpeckers flew in the window and sat down on Pinocchio's nose, pecking at it until it got down to normal size. Ah, how good you are, fairy of mine, and how much I love you. If you want to stay with me, I'll be your little sister. And my poor father? He'll be here soon. Honestly? Then I'll go meet him. Pinocchio took off, but he no sooner got into the woods than guess who appeared? The fox and the cat. The cat was lame in one leg, so he asked him what had happened. My friend gave his paw to an old famished wolf who was asking him for alms. Not to change the subject, but why don't you come with us and plant your coins in the field of miracles? Okay, let's go. I'll come with you. They set out and went through a town called Fool's Trap, inhabited by a crowd of beggars. Once past the walls, they stopped in a solitary field. Pinocchio buried his coins and watered them. Come back later, and you'll find a little tree full of coins. And wishing Pinocchio a splendid harvest, the two scoundrels went about their business. When he thought it was time, Pinocchio went back to the Field of Miracles, where he met a parrot who was laughing.
What are you laughing about? Oh, I'm laughing at those fools who believe that one can sow and harvest money in the fields. I don't know what you mean. While you were in town, the fox and the cat came back to get the coins and then ran away faster than the wind.
The puppet, in a fit of despair, ran back into town and went straight to the court to denounce the two crooks. The judge, a respectable gorilla, benignly listened to him. Then he reached out and rang a bell. Two mastiffs, dressed like policemen, immediately appeared.
This poor fellow has been robbed. Put him into prison right away.
And that's where Pinocchio had to stay for 4 months, until the young emperor who reigned over the town of Fool's Trap ordered a great public rejoicing and had the prisons opened and all the rascals set free. You can imagine how happy Pinocchio was when he was free once more. He set out immediately for the fairy's house. What a lot of mishaps I've had. But from now on, I'm going to be a good boy. I've seen for myself that one always has to pay for disobeying. All of a sudden, he stopped. Stretched out across the road was a great big serpent. The puppet stopped and waited for him to go away, but the serpent just lay there without moving. I wonder if he's dead. And he started to climb over him. But suddenly the serpent raised himself up, and the puppet fell down with his head stuck in the mud and his legs up in the air. At the sight, the serpent began to laugh so hard that he couldn't stop and really died. Pinocchio started running through the fields to go back to the fairy. When he reached the field where the little white house had stood, it wasn't there anymore. Instead, he found a piece of white marble on which the following words were inscribed. Here lies the blue-haired child who died of sorrow on being abandoned by her little brother Pinocchio. Pinocchio burst out crying. His wailing was so loud and heartbreaking that all the hills around were filled with echoes. A dove passed by and called down from very high up. Oh, do you by chance know a puppet named Pinocchio? I'm Pinocchio. Then I'm sure you know Geppetto. He's my poor father, but is he still alive? I left him on the beach this morning where he was building himself a boat. He says he's going to look for you in the new world. Oh, how I wish I had your wings so I could join him. I'll take you there. Pinocchio jumped on his back, and the dove flew so high they touched the clouds. The morning after, they reached the ocean. The dove set Pinocchio on the ground and flew out of sight. The beach was full of people who were pointing at a boat that was sinking, when all of a sudden they saw a boy diving into the sea.
That's my father! I want to save my father!
Pinocchio swam all night until a huge wave cast him up on an island in the middle of the ocean. A big dolphin passed.
You haven't by chance seen a little boat with my father in it? He's probably been eaten by the terrible shark. Heavens above!
The puppet politely said goodbye and set out on the path where he soon arrived in the land of busy bees. Everyone was working. Everyone had something to do. In the meanwhile, hunger was gnawing away at his stomach. What could he do? A coal dealer passed by.
Please, could you give me a penny?
I'll give you 4 if you help me pull these 2 carts of coal.
I'm not a donkey.
Then eat 2 slices of your pride.
A mason went by.
Wouldn't you be so kind as to give a penny to a boy who's dying of hunger?
If you'll come and help me carry lime mortar.
But I don't want to work so hard.
Then enjoy your hunger.
A woman went by and she gave him something to drink.
If you help me carry these pitchers, I'll give you a piece of bread and cauliflower, and then a nice piece of sweet.
Pinocchio couldn't stand it any longer and helped the woman. When they got home, he ate until he almost burst, and then he raised his eyes.
Oh, you remind me of... You've got blue hair too. Oh, my fairy.
In the end, the woman admits that she's the fairy. When you left me, I was a child, and now I'm a woman. I could be your mother.
But how did you manage to grow so fast? Teach me how to do it.
But you can't grow. You're only a puppet.
I'm tired of being a puppet. It's high time I became a man like everybody else.
And so you will. If only you can get used to being a good boy like you should.
I promise to study and to work, because I'm bored with being a puppet.
The day after, Pinocchio went to school. It's easy to imagine what the boys did when they saw a puppet come in the door. They became hilarious.
You better watch out. I want to be respected. You talk like a printed book.
One, more cheeky than the rest, reached out to grab his nose, but Pinocchio gave him a kick on his shins.
Ow! What odd feet! And elbows.
In the end, it didn't take Pinocchio long to make friends with everybody. And the teacher praised him too, for he saw that he paid attention and studied hard. One day, as he was on his way to school, the puppet met a crowd of his schoolmates.
There's a big shark on the beach.
Do you suppose it's the one that was around when my poor father died?
We're going to the beach to take a look. Gonna come along?
I want to see the shark. But I'll go after school.
Do you think a fish is going to wait until it's convenient for you?
Let's go then.
And the fastest is the best.
And he started running as if he had wings on his feet. When Pinocchio got to the beach, the sea was as smooth as a looking glass.
What's the point of telling me the story of the shark? Because somebody who studies always makes those who don't look stupid. And so? So you'd better get bored with school.
The puppet went off towards town, but he didn't feel at all right about things. Oh, now what am I going to tell the fairy? Will she forgive me? On reaching the house, his courage left him, but in the end he took the knocker and knocked. He waited and waited, and finally a snail looked out the window.
Wait for me there. Get a move on. I'm dying of the cold. Snails are never in a hurry.
2 hours went by, and the door still hadn't opened.
Dear snail, I've been waiting for 2 hours.
The puppet kicked the door so hard that his foot got stuck in the wood. It was either the pain or his empty stomach. In any case, he fell down in a faint, and the snail found him stretched out on the ground. When he came to, the fairy was by his side. "I'll forgive you this time, but don't you dare get into mischief again." Pinocchio swore that he would behave, and maintained his promise for the rest of the year. Pleased as can be, one day the fairy called him. "Tomorrow your dream will come true. You will become a real boy." Pinocchio went to call his friends and invite them to a party to celebrate the great event, and found Lampwick under a portico.
What are you doing there? I'm waiting for midnight when I'm leaving.
Where to?
The most wonderful land in the world.
What's it called?
The land of toys.
Why don't you come along?
Who, me? Not on your life. You're making a big mistake. Nobody ever studies there. And what does one do all day? Just have fun. Oh, boy. I'm sure I'd have a great time there. You're coming with me, then? Well, the fairy will scold me. And after she's scolded you soundly, she'll quiet down. If only I had to wait an hour, I'd almost be tempted to wait. And if the fairy scolds you, after she's scolded me soundly, she'll quiet down. There it comes. What's coming? It's the coach.
The coach, drawn by 12 pairs of donkeys, arrived silently. The driver was a small man, wider than he was tall, soft and oily, like a ball of butter, with an unctuous voice.
"Well, my fine lad, are you coming with us?" Of course he is. Come on, Pinocchio. Come with us. No. What will my good fairy say? Come on, come with us, and we'll have a good time. Yeah, Pinocchio, come on. Yeah. Hey there, Mr. Driver. This donkey's crying. Oh, let him cry. He'll laugh when he gets married.
Pinocchio leaves with them, and when they arrive in the land of toys, he joins the merriment with all the other scamps. Surrounded by all kinds of games and fun, the hours, the days, and the weeks passed by like lightning. Pinocchio had been enjoying himself doing nothing for 5 months, when one morning he had an unpleasant surprise. When he woke up, he found he had a magnificent pair of donkey ears. When he heard all this screaming, a little groundhog came in.
Ah, what's the matter?
I'm sick.
Oh, you've got donkey's fever. You'll turn into a donkey like those that pull the cabbage carts in the market.
Oh, poor me. Sooner or later, all the boys who spend their days having fun are transformed into donkeys.
The puppet went out looking for Lampwick and found him shut up in his room with a cap that covered his head down as far as his nose.
How are you, dear Lampwick? Oh, contented as a mouse in a piece of cheese. Then why have you got your ears covered? Oh, I hurt my knee, and I skinned my foot. Could it be the same disease? Let's both take our caps off. Agreed?
When they saw that the same misfortune had befallen both of them, they broke out laughing. All of a sudden, Lampwick staggered.
Help! Help! I can't stand upright on my legs.
Neither can I.
And while they were talking, they changed into donkeys. Meanwhile, somebody knocked on the door.
Open the door. Open it up right away, or it'll be the worse for you.
It was the small man who had kicked open the door.
Well done, boys. You brayed just fine. Now I'll carry you down till you're as shiny as 2 mirrors, and then I'll take you to the market.
Lampwick was sold to a farmer, and Pinocchio to an animal trainer who wanted to make him a circus attraction. From the very first, Pinocchio had to face a life of hardships and drudgery, and had to get used to eating straw and hay. Then came the day in which his owner had posters put up, which advertised the gala performance with the famous donkey Pinocchio. All the seats around the ring were packed with boys and girls. The ringmaster gave the following exaggerated speech.
Honored public, ladies and gentlemen, your most humble servant, while passing through your illustrious city, has taken it upon himself to be honored and to have the pleasure of presenting you with a famous donkey who has already had the honor of dancing for all the principal courts of Europe. Admire him and then judge for yourself.
Pinocchio bent his knees to the ground and remained kneeling until the ringmaster cracked his whip, and then, obediently, walked, trotted and galloped, according to the orders. While he was running as fast as he could, he happened to glance up and saw a beautiful lady in one of the boxes, and she had a medallion around her neck with the portrait of a puppet. Oh, it's the fairy! But what came from his throat was a bray so long and so loud that it made all the spectators laugh. And to his dismay, he saw that the fairy had disappeared. Pinocchio tried to jump through the hoop 2 or 3 times. Finally, he jumped through, but he entangled his hind legs. When he got back up, he found he was lame, and so he was sold to make a drum from his skin. The buyer led the donkey to a rock by the shore, tied a rock round his neck, and threw him into the water. Then he sat down to wait until he drowned, so that he could skin him.
By now, the donkey should be good and drowned. Let's pull him back up.
The poor man stood there with his mouth open.
But what's happened to the donkey?
That donkey is me.
But how come you've become a puppet?
I was a puppet until I became a donkey. When the fairy saw I was in danger of drowning, she sent a school of fish to eat away my donkey skin until they got to the wood.
I want my money back.
Goodbye, master. And remember me?
And with that, Pinocchio swam off like a dolphin. As he was swimming, he noted a rock in the water, and on the rock, a little goat with bright blue fleece.
Hurry up, Pinocchio. The monster is getting closer.
But by then it was too late. The horrible head of a shark with an enormous gaping mouth sucked him in as if he was sucking in a raw egg. When the puppet came to, it was completely dark all around.
Help! Help!
Who do you think is going to help you, poor wretch?
Who's that talking?
I'm a poor tunny fish who's been swallowed just like you.
And now what are we supposed to do here in the dark?
Wait for the shark to digest us.
Pinocchio thought he saw a tiny light way off in the distance.
Maybe there's some fish who can show me the way. Goodbye, tunny fish.
Goodbye, puppet.
Pinocchio began to feel his way towards the light, and when he arrived, what did he find? He found a little old man. His hair is white as snow, and he's sitting at a laid table.
Oh, Daddy! Dear Daddy! I've finally found you!
Are you really my dear little Pinocchio?
It's me! It really is! Oh, if only you knew all the terrible things that have happened to me. Tell me about yourself.
Well, a horrible shark swallowed me like a piece of ravioli.
And how did you manage to keep alive?
When he swallowed me, the shark also swallowed a ship full of provisions. But now there's nothing left in the larder.
Then there's no time to be lost. We'll have to jump into the water and swim away.
But I don't know how to swim.
You can climb on my shoulders and I'll carry you up to the shore.
And so they crossed the entire body of the shark, and since he suffered from asthma, he had to sleep with his mouth open.
This is the right time to escape. The ocean is calm and it's as bright as day.
And as soon as Geppetto had got himself properly situated on his son's shoulders, Pinocchio jumped into the water.
Cheer up, Daddy. In a few minutes we'll be safe.
Poor Pinocchio made believe he was cheerful, but his strength was ebbing away, and the shore was still far off. Father and son were about to drown when the tunny fish appeared.
That voice! You're Pinocchio!
That's who I am. And who are you?
I'm the tunny fish. I got away too.
I beg you, for the love you bear your children and your little tunnies, help us.
With all my heart.
And he carried them to the shore.
Oh, dear friend, you saved my father. Let me give you a kiss.
And now, where are we going to go?
In search of a house.
Give some alms to the poor invalids.
Invalids. Goodbye, scoundrels.
No. Have pity on us.
Stolen money never yields returns. Goodbye.
Father and son continued on their way until they came to a small house in which to seek shelter. Pinocchio went to find a cup of milk for his father and arrived at a farmer's house.
We can make a deal if you're willing to do the work of my donkey, who's now almost dead.
Pinocchio asked to see him. As soon as he entered the stable and saw the poor animal stretched out on the straw, he began to tremble. He bent over to ask who he was in donkey language. The donkey opened his eyes and with his last breath gasped,
Lamp.
and then he died. Pinocchio set to work at once. He had never worked as hard as this in his whole life. He also learnt to make pottery and so had enough to pay for their needs. And evenings he practiced reading and writing. After 5 months he had managed to set aside 40 pence to buy himself a new suit. As he left the house, he heard the snail call him by name.
Where did you leave the fairy? Has she pardoned me? She's sick in the hospital, brought down by 1,000 calamities. She doesn't even have enough to buy herself a bit of bread. Oh, poor fairy. I only have these 40 pennies. Take them to the fairy right away.
That evening, when Pinocchio went to bed, he dreamt of the fairy. "Well done, Pinocchio. On account of your kind heart, I pardon you for all the pranks that you have played." When he woke up, he realized he was no longer a puppet, but a good-looking young boy with brown hair and blue eyes. He found himself in a nicely furnished little room, and when he jumped out of bed, he saw a new suit with a cap and a pair of leather boots. Next door, he found Geppetto as well, lively and good-humoured as he had once been. Pinocchio hugged and kissed him.
What does this sudden change all mean?
It's all thanks to you. Good boys make life pleasant for their families too.
And whatever happened to the wooden Pinocchio?
Geppetto pointed to a puppet leaning against a chair, his head turned sideways, his arms dangling, and his legs crossed, so that it seemed a miracle that he could stand at all.
Daddy, dear Daddy, I've finally found you.